The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Donna Will. I'm the Professional Development Coordinator for Central Maryland Regional Office, and the DDA welcomes you to another Employment First webinar. We have multiple presenters today, and they will be introduced shortly. Before we begin, I would like to go over a few things about the webinar. All participants are in listen-only mode. There are two options for listening to the webinar, by computer and by phone. If you have trouble hearing, you may want to try switching by clicking on the button next to computer audio or phone call. Let's see, we have handouts also for the webinar. You can download them. I think it's in a PDF format. If you want the PowerPoint document, I can email that to people. There's only so much memory that the thing can take, so we have it in PDF today. We're also recording the webinar, and we'll send out a link to everyone a day after the webinar. So if you missed it or you want to review it, that'll be there for you. Questions can be typed in anytime in the question box on the webinar panel. However, we're going to answer the questions at the end of the presentation. I think that's about it for housekeeping. So I would like to introduce Stacy Jones, the Statewide Career and Employment Services Coordinator. And are you there, Stacy?
I am there.
Yay! Okay.
Thank you so much, Donna.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty.
And thanks to everyone that has joined us today for our webinar. Today's topic of focus is going to be on ways to think about increasing employer engagement. Before we head into that, I want to just start by talking about a few quick things and announcements. First of all, I'd like to do some thank yous. October was a really big month for us. This was National Employment Disability Awareness Month, and there was a lot going on. So big thank you to everybody that participated in our Employment First Summit back in October. We heard from Deputy Secretary Simons and our Director of Programs, Patricia Sistoki. We were able to provide a recap of all of our Employment First initiatives, and we shared our focus areas for the coming year. We had several wonderful subject matter experts that presented. We heard about the Maryland Community of Practice for supporting families, and specifically how to use the Life Course Framework tools as supporting the path to employment. We heard about different ways to think about transportation and the importance of strong leadership at the organizational level when transforming an organization to align with the principles of Employment First. So if you didn't get a chance to participate in the full day event, the entire PowerPoint presentation is actually on the DDA Employment First webpage under the newsletter tab, and it includes all of the presentations from all of our presenters. So check that out if you didn't get a chance. I'd also like to just say a really quick thank you to all of the service provider organizations that I've had the opportunity to visit over the last about month and a half. Part of my role is to just provide some check-in with providers and to see what's happening and see what supports might be necessary or needed around organizational transformation. So I've done this in a number of ways, some informal discussions with management teams, more informal discussions with staff, and presentations with parent groups. And in fact, I would just like to say that one of the best things that I'm seeing a lot of and hearing about is provider organizations engaging with families and keeping them educated and up to date around changes in their own organizations, and also things related to Employment First and the CMS final rule. So those things are very positive, and thank you. And also just a final thank you to all of DDA's partners at the state level in Employment First. We've been doing just an extreme amount of collaboration with the Department of Disability, the State Department of Education, Division of Rehab Services, Department of Labor Licensing and Regulation, and the Behavioral Health Administration. And I anticipate that that collaboration will continue over the next year. And also just all of our other stakeholders and partners, our DDA regional staff, CCSs, families, and individuals and services that continue to make this Employment First initiative so successful. Whoops, my slide, sorry about that. And let me talk about just two really quick updates. One is related to the Community Pathways Waiver Renewal. It's currently open for public comment from now up until December 12th. So if you have comments that you would like to share, they should be sent to the dedicated email address that's up on your screen. And the PowerPoint presentation that I'm presenting today has a lot of links in it. So when you get a copy of it from the website, you'll be able to go directly through those links to some of these resources. And hopefully everybody is aware at this point that the long-awaited rate setting study has been completed. You can read a complete copy of the report on our website. Again, if you have questions related to the report, they should be sent to the dedicated email address that's up on your screen, ratestudyinfo.dda@maryland.gov. There were 4 regional information sessions that were held this week, and based on questions that were asked or were collected at these sessions, a frequently asked question document will be drafted to help address those for people that didn't have a chance to attend those sessions. Okay, so that's all for general announcements related to DDA in particular. Now I'd like to just talk quickly about the Employment First Disability Employment Policy, ODEP, their Employment First State Leadership Mentor Program. Not sure if everybody has heard this or not, but Maryland was once again selected to receive training and technical assistance as a core state for the coming fiscal year. This is really exciting because now our state is eligible to receive 200 hours of technical assistance to support us in achieving our goals as an employment first state. This is actually a competitive process, so not all states that apply are chosen to participate. ODEP communicated that they were pleased with our past success, and they recognized Maryland as a leader in achieving results. So I would also like to say that one of the keys to success, in my estimation, in using these resources is the strong collaboration that DDA is sharing with our state partners that allows us to continue achieving outcomes related to employment, and those partnerships will continue. So the 200 hours that we received will be allocated among 2 theme areas. The first one is capacity building, and the second is provider transformation. And under capacity building, we have two smaller themes that we want to focus on. And the first one is collaboration among day, employment, and residential providers and other stakeholders around how to support employment outcomes in our current system. And the second is raising capacity among service providers to support self-employment outcomes. And I think that focus will be very interesting because we've done a lot around how to help people start their own businesses, but there's a difference between helping support someone to start a business versus the supports it may take to help that be sustainable into the future. So we want to really dig a little deeper into that. Under the theme of provider transformation, we're going to focus heavily on executive leadership development with the focus area on financial literacy and board of directors engagement. We're also going to be focusing on family engagement. So again, how are we engaging with families throughout the state regarding our service delivery, regarding employment first, changes in our system, and provider organizational change. And then finally, a focus on increasing the capacity in our system to provide quality community-based non-work supports. So we have new service definitions that are being submitted under our new Medicaid waiver, and we want to be sure that provider organizations have the support they need to provide quality services related to those outcomes. So as we develop those plans, stakeholders will certainly have that information, but we're just at the beginning stages of creating our TA plan and coordinating with our subject matter experts who will be working with us over the next 9 months or so. So that's all for announcements. We're going to shift now to the topic of today's webinar, which is the importance of employer engagement. And I'd like to direct you to the list that is up on this current slide. This list comes from our federal partners at ODEP, who through their research have found that states that show performance excellence in employment first principles and outcomes focus on these 10 critical areas. And those 10 critical areas include having an employment first policy and statement, focus on proper rate and reimbursement for employment services, a focus on capacity building, focus on interagency coordination, provider transformation, the phase out of 14C sub-minimum wage certificates, focus on mental health services, seamless transition, data collection systems, and the very last one that I highlighted in red is employer engagement. So I would say by looking at this list, we've definitely been hitting pretty hard a lot of the first 9 on that list, and employer engagement is one where we'd like to focus some attention. So there really are a lot of ways to focus on employer engagement. You know, these can be things that are more at the higher state level. These could be initiatives that can be done to engage, but may touch more on policy issues. Today, we're really going to focus more on the provider level focus on employer engagement. So I've included a link on this slide, which will take you to ODEP's resource page related to employer engagement, and they just have a ton of really great resources that I would highly recommend if you're doing employment services at your organization, that you just take the time to look at. There are some really nice toolkits and rack cards, information that can be shared with employers, information about accommodations, and just general resources. So I highly recommend that. So now I'd like to introduce you to our first presenter, Tim Lawson, who's with DovePoint Incorporated in Salisbury. Tim began at DovePoint as a direct support professional and eventually moved on to case manager, supervisor, day services director. Last year, Tim stepped into a newly created role of transitioning and grant writing specialist. His role is a combination of strategic planning, executing grants, and overseeing quality enhancement and CMS compliance for the entire agency. So just a few responsibilities there. However, something else I know about Tim, based on the interactions that he and I have had, is that he also has a huge passion for employment for people with disabilities. He's highly engaged in all of the various technical assistance resources around employment, and he has really shown himself as a leader. So Tim is going to take some time now to talk a little bit about DovePoint as an organization, how they're approaching organizational transformation, and how they have begun engaging with employers differently, and what they have seen come out of that engagement. So I'm going to switch over control here so that Tim can have control of the screen. So Tim, you should see a little message come on your end.
I did. Give me just a moment. I clicked on show my screen. Just looking for the presentation. Where did that go? Give me just a second. I apologize. I didn't have it pulled up. Give me just a moment, people. I'm so sorry. But I'll click over in just a moment. Okay. So who we are at DovePoint, I wanted to kind of give everybody just a moment to kind of see who we are and what it is we do. What we do is we are both a DDA and a TBI service provider here in Maryland. We are on the Lower Eastern Shore in Salisbury. We have been in existence for almost 50 years, which is a positive and a negative. It's a positive in the sense that we have a good foothold in the community, but it's a negative in the sense that sometimes families become entrenched in the way that they're seeing things that need to happen. So I wanted to thank everybody, including Stacy, for allowing us the opportunity to participate in this. We have been doing a lot of work for the last couple of years, and I also wanted to be really honest with everybody. This is a really grounded view that we have of the situation, because we're not completely there, but we're working toward it. And that really is the number one thing, if I leave with anybody today, is regardless of what your situation is, you need to be able to work toward it. You need to constantly be in motion, trying things, piloting things. Not everything you do will work, but you don't know whether or not it'll work until you try it. I also wanted to mention here at the beginning that we are actively engaged in the community of practice here on the Eastern Shore for employment, and we participated in them on a state level as well. And we find that that is not only a benefit for us, but hopefully we can also at times be benefits for others. So kind of a re-encouragement of something that Stacy had said at one of the in-person sessions. If you don't have an active community of practice going on in your region or in your area, I strongly encourage you guys to try to get together and see if you can get that going, because it can be an invaluable resource. And we have certainly found it to be so. So tell you a couple things about where we are. Obviously, you guys could see from my title, I'm not specifically employment staff. My title is Transitioning and Grant Writing Specialist. That's quite a mouthful. The reason that we titled it that way is I'm in charge of everything CMS compliance related, as well as finding the grant money for our agency to be able to do some of those things. And I'll be able to share an experience that we had successfully with the grant a little bit later on. But one of the things that I wanted to point out to you guys is we strongly advise, and this comes directly from my executive director, we really encourage your agency to assign someone to be in charge of tracking your progress in dealing with these things, not just employment, but in general. That doesn't necessarily have to be a created role as mine was, although that is certainly optional if your agency is able to do so, but to really at least have someone who you're able to take some responsibilities that they currently have off of them so that they can devote some time to it. Because depending on the size of your agency, you cannot turn that ship on a dime. You just can't. It's going to take time to change your way you operate. It's going to take time to change your thinking, change your approach and your structures, and it's not going to happen easily, and it's not going to happen overnight, but it will happen if you commit yourself to it. And that is, in our feeling, one of the things that you have to do is you have to commit somebody to be able to spend at least part of their time to constantly keeping the agency looking at where are we in line with the changes that are evolving over time with us as an agency. We are traditionally more of a day hab center-based facility, which is in and of itself a challenge. However, we have had successes because we embrace the fact that we need to change and that we need to do it with everyone involved as a stakeholder, communicating back and forth. It really has to be a multiple directional conversation to be successful. So, you know, I will share everything that is specific to our agency that we've had some successes about. Obviously on this, I cannot share everything that we've done and all of the things that have been successful, but I kind of wanted to share some things with everybody today that I think have the most impact. And then obviously at the end of the entire webinar, if you have any questions for me specifically, please type them in during the webinar, and Stacy and Donna will make sure that we're able to answer all those questions. But a couple things I wanted to be able to share with you. I truly believe that catching up real quick here, sorry. I truly believe that, you know, there's a few things that you have to have, and this kind of dovetails a little bit with what Tom and Jenny said during the previous trainings that we had. And one of those things is you have to have something in writing, some kind of a strategic plan, or at least a plan. And it needs to be written, and it needs to be something that you can track. And it should guide everything you do as an agency, not just employment. And it really needs to be a commitment that you're going to do that. And the reason I say that is because you will not be able to be successful in the long run if you don't really have it. The second thing I kind of mentioned before, which you really need one person that's responsible for tracking your ongoing progress, kind of somebody like your navigator, keep you on course, you know, tell you if you're veering too far off or losing track of where you're going. And we certainly had to do a reset ourselves as an agency a few times just in the last year and a half, almost 2 years, because you're constantly getting caught up in the operations and in the individual situations, as you should. But sometimes as an agency, you can kind of lose focus. So you really need to bring yourself back when that happens. And the last thing I would like to suggest is really don't wait as an agency. If you're not already actively working on supported employment in the community, even to some extent the community-based non-work, if you're not working on those things, you've got to start working on them. Create a plan, create a general timetable. Things will sneak up on us. Even with the 3-year extension for some of the compliance, we have things like the Equal Employment Act, the WEOA. We have things like that that are going to proceed along on their current track. They're not going to change even if CMS enforcement might change a little bit. So we really need to constantly make ourselves cognizant of that. And I want to give you a real quick oversight into what our structure of employment services is. Our structure is that we have what's called a community outreach director, and that one person oversees everything that we do that is community inclusion, essentially. Supported employment, which for us includes the customized discovery, which we have ACRE-trained job developers, job readiness, including resume coaching, searching for jobs, and then actual on-site job coaching. So all of that falls under the umbrella of supported employment. Then we also have what we call community inclusion, which is slightly separate but part of the greater scheme of it, and that includes community volunteering activities and community recreational activities, which are, of course, specific to the individual. And just a couple of simple examples is we work with the Maryland Food Bank, we work with humane societies, things like that, where we can take individuals, and some individuals that we have had go to the community volunteering in the past are now working community jobs. So I also wanted to remind you that our agency shouldn't be neglectful of one, focusing only on the employment, that one can sometimes be a step to the other, as I'm sure many of you realize. But today, for this webinar, I'm focusing only on the supported employment parts that we do. So as you see from the screen I have up, changing gears is something that we found was really vital to us, and it's been very difficult for us overall. There are advantages and disadvantages to whatever size your particular organization or agency is. If it's large, it can give you some flexibility, particularly with some funding flexibility to pilot some things. You can do it in a small agency, but sometimes a larger agency just allows you the opportunity to do that. But as I said earlier, if you're a large agency and you've been around for a long time, you don't turn that RV on a dime. You just don't. It takes time and it takes patience and a few backing up and starting and pulling forward. Also, the last thing for us that's a unique challenge is we are on the Eastern Shore. And anyone that knows anything about the Eastern Shore, which I'm born and raised, by the way, so I can own this, but anyone that's from the Eastern Shore knows we don't like change, ever, any kind of change. So it's a constant communication, explaining to people why there's inherent benefit for them or for their family member or even the staff in why we need to change and how it really ultimately falls into the benefit of everyone. And I appreciate the comment Stacy made at the top, because I am very passionate about this. I do believe that this is one of the civil rights issues of our time, is helping individuals with disabilities be self-advocates, to be able to get out there and live independently, work independently. And obviously, you know, we know just as well as every other agency that not everyone's going to be successful right away, but we can't write off the success someone may or may not have. We need to work in that direction. So, changing gears. We've been utilizing, as I mentioned before, a comprehensive strategic plan to drive how we do our transformation, and it's constantly evolving. It's a very organic process that we have, and actually we are doing a presentation at the MAX Leadership Conference at the end of November, and we'll be talking in more detail about that aspect of it. But I just wanted to mention it on this, that is what's allowed us to have the success that we've had. Part of the big change for us was to identify strategies on how we can improve and increase the community-based employment. We've been doing it and we've had successes, but I wouldn't say that we were transformative until the last couple of years. We have been able to utilize several different strategies that I'm going to share with you, varying degrees of success, but all of them lead towards something else. And the idea is to constantly engage and draw community employers into a closer relationship with us, and to constantly warm up the possibilities for individuals we support. And also, a thing that I found that we've done really well is we've been really good at bouncing ideas around within the organization and not automatically just saying that's not going to work or we've tried that before. We also don't wait to research and see if someone else has tried something. We come up with ideas, and because we don't really throw anything away, sometimes the ideas when they're first brought up may be like, really? But you make a plan, you follow it through on a small scale most of the time and see what works, and then you know whether or not you can continue it. And I say varying degrees of success because not everything works the way we plan, and sometimes we discard an idea because it worked nothing like we planned, and other times it doesn't work as well as we thought, and then in hindsight, it worked much better than we expected. So, the first thing I wanted to share with you that was something that we tried was we identified a need that we needed to increase the number of employers that were aware of and willing to even hire individuals with disabilities. And one technique we came up with is we have a banquet center for anyone that's familiar with Dove Point, and we host events for the community. But in addition to that, we also have the capability of providing breakfast. And so one of the things we do is we have started having employer breakfast. So we've been doing this for about the last year and a half. We actually just did our third one this past October, and varying degrees of success comes directly into this. We do them every April and October, and the reason we picked those months was because we wanted to meet the hiring needs of the businesses here geographically where we are. Situated in a very large retail area in Salisbury and being very close to Ocean City, which is very seasonal and tourism based, we really wanted to make sure that we hit April before they hire for the summer. And we also wanted to hit October when a lot of businesses are beginning to hire for the holiday, even if it's additional peak staff just for the holiday. Because once you get your foot in the door, you don't know where it can lead. We had an individual a few years ago that got a job doing basically stocking type things at the Toys R Us here in town, and it went very well. It was only seasonal based on the Christmas holiday shopping season, but it's that first step. We do invite local employers in the area, and we have a very extensive way that we go about doing that. But we invite local employers to a free breakfast buffet at our agency. We do it around 8 to 10 in the morning because we try to make it so it's before employers or even HR departments get too deep into their day. We will do it at another time of day if the interest comes back to us. But that's what we've done so far, and that seems to be a good time of day from the reaction we've gotten. We always highlight a topic, and it's not a complex topic, and it's not the program can be anywhere from a half an hour to maybe an hour out of that 2 hours. We try not to make it overly formal, except for the fact that we want to provide something of value to those people that are attending. Sometimes it's information. Sometimes we had a panel in the past where we actually had employers, people from DDA. Stacy actually was able to help us with it. And we actually did that where we were actually able to give some ideas and suggestions to other employers that came to find out about it. And that, has a dual purpose. Not only are we looking for being able to educate people, but you never know when you're going to get an employer out of it. And then the last breakfast that we just had in October, we featured Dwayne Ross, who was recommended to us through Maryland Works, and he talked on the subject of job carving. He does have a speaker fee. It's not unreasonable, but he does have it. And one of the things that we looked into doing was, before we committed to bringing him in, we looked into possibly getting a grant to cover it. And of course, this is also in my wheelhouse with what I currently do. So what we were able to do is we were able to write a community foundation grant, and under their workforce development program that they have at the local community foundation, they were able to completely fund his speaker fees. We completely funded the meal fees. And so it was almost a 50-50 match anyway. But even though it was an in-kind donation from us as an agency, it is a substantial donation. So that is part of how we got the Community Foundation grant. I wanted to take a moment to thank Stacy for helping me get the grant endorsement from Deputy Secretary Simons. We also got one from Doors, and we also got one from Worcester County Developmental Center, another DDA partner agency of ours here on the Lower Eastern Shore. So those 3 letters of support also greatly helped. And I know from everyone that attended that particular breakfast, they got a lot out of it. Matter of fact, we added him to our list in addition to Joe Macbeth as someone that we would want to do training for our own staff. So I kind of mentioned Doors, and that kind of fits into the next part with the community partnerships. Community partnerships for us are a big thing that we have really started looking at differently. Obviously, we've always worked with the school systems for transitioning youth. We've always worked with Doors on some level. But in looking at this, as we did our strategic plan and our building towards this increase in community employment, we looked at we really need to develop a stronger relationship with Doors. So one thing we needed to do was we needed to get in contact with them. One of our job developers has built a very good rapport just through working with specific individuals. And I wanted to take a moment. Lady's name is Jessie Ferriero here in the Eastern Shore, and she's been a great resource to us. Very helpful, very supportive. She actually participated in the planning of our second breakfast, which was this past April, where we had the panel. She's participated in some of our strategic plan in-house meetings on the phone and helped us with some technical assistance. So if you're able to, I would definitely encourage you to try to get your doors office on board. You may know more than them of different points of what's going on. They may know more, but keeping that back and forth communication is really helpful. I find, at least in my personal experience, that wall between the Department of Education and the Department of Health sometimes is a wall and sometimes it's not. We don't assume that they know anything. We just try to make sure we build on the same page. So Doors recently here at the OneStop Job Market, which is in Wicomico County, actually hosted a 3-day boot camp for individuals. And the boot camp essentially was their teaching them how to not only build a resume and talk about their experience, but how to actually do a presentation, which you would do a display on the table, to be able to not only do that presentation, but to be able to talk proactively with potential employers, to be able to smile, make eye contact, initiate the conversation. And that led up to them being able to be participants in what's called a reverse job fair. And for those of you who do not know what that is, a reverse job fair is when prospective employees, so the individuals we support, set up their little tables or their space with their displays, and it would talk about their experience, the types of things they've done in training, even if they've done it in-house at your day program, cleaning, anything along those lines that they have done. Working in our kitchen for us gives you direct experience. We have people that are safe certified through kitchen from working in our kitchen, so it's actual, you can take that to a commercial restaurant. So what they do is the individuals stand there at their table and the employers come in and only go and visit the individuals that have experience that matches what their business is. So it saves a lot of time for the employer. And as someone who's worked in human resources before, I can tell you that it's invaluable if the employer only has to be there for 10 minutes or half an hour versus standing at a job fair for 30 minutes or 2 hours and maybe not talking to anyone who matches what your hiring needs are. And we need to make it easier for employers to consider hiring the individuals we support. We need to be able to show them value. And we have to be able to make that conversation easy for them. Because whether they are a large business or a small business, we have to provide value to them. And that's really, I think, something that we're discovering as we go is a different way of presenting it. So our first big success that came out of the employer breakfast, this came out of the first one, which was a year ago in October. Johnny Janosic is a very, very large furniture store in Laurel, Delaware. It's less than a half an hour from where we are. They realized that their salespeople were not able to keep their showroom, which is very large, very extensive, lots of people in and out every day. They weren't able to keep it tidy. They weren't able to keep the place dusted, to keep things picked up, vacuuming perhaps, whatever needed to be done. And so in identifying those needs, they realized that they needed additional staff. So as we discussed this possibility with them, it led to the identification that what they really could use was about 3 people every day to be able to do that. Obviously, a smaller establishment, it might be 1, but there it was 3. Well, as we looked at this and we looked at the individuals we support, we discovered that some of the people that would be ideal for this may not be interested or able to work a full 8-hour day, even necessarily a 6-hour day. So what we ended up doing was we ended up talking to them about what if we have 2 shifts of 3 people each. And this was a back and forth ongoing conversation we had with them. And we provide a job coach. So we have an on-site job coach that is there for quality control to kind of help keep people in task, help them with any problems they have if necessary. Anything that comes up, they're there. And they are our fully trained DDA, staff that we would have here at the agency. So the job coach is hired by us, but each of the individuals gets paid directly through Johnny Janosic. Does not funnel through us as an agency. All we provide is the job coach for support, and we provide the transportation to and from the establishment. So that has been very successful, and it was something that, we started out hoping that they might be able to hire somebody. We didn't know how. And as the conversation evolved, we found out that we added real value to them. And they're very happy because they've had comments from customers about how nice the showroom looks and things like that. And so many individuals we support, I know we all find that they really want to do a good job. They take a lot of personal pride in it. In many ways, I find some of the individuals we support superior to people, quote unquote, without disabilities who are in the general workforce, only because I believe it means more to some of them. And they take a lot of pride and dignity in it. And that's another way you can show value to an employer. The next thing that we looked at was best temps. And this was actually an idea from one of our specific job developers on, why not? Why don't we look into that possibility? Because it is a legitimate community-based job paying at least minimum wage. Many of our individuals have the skills. So it kind of fits into our organizational thought of what I personally call the buffet philosophy. And the buffet philosophy is, what if someone doesn't like turkey, but they like roast beef, and they don't like potato salad, but they like green beans, and they don't want a salad, but they want soup? Well, if you put all of that out on the buffet for them, then they're able to pick the things that they want, which is really what you and I do in general life anyway. We pick the things that we like. So if we offer as many different possibilities to the individuals we support, it increases the odds that they're going to find a niche that they're successful and happy in. So we begin speaking with some of the temp employment agencies in the area, and the most successful partnership right now that we have is with Best Temps. But it was a slow start, not in that they didn't support us, but in that getting people, our individuals, to buy into the idea and then being able to find matches didn't happen right away. We do have individuals working directly for them right now, and whatever jobs they have to offer, we work with them to try to match with someone. Now, we do have a few individuals who actually contact Best Temps directly, just like any other member of the community would, and those individuals actually will call Best Temps up and say, do you have anything for me today? One individual in particular I wanted to highlight has had success getting all kinds of jobs over the years, many in cleaning and things like that. He's worked directly for many community employers as a direct employee, getting paid directly from the job. We may or may not have assisted him depending on the job with transportation. But the problem he's always had, the struggle he's had, is he gets bored and he walks off and quits the job after a few weeks, maybe a month or two. And it's been an ongoing barrier. He could get the job, but he wasn't interested in keeping it, or there was something about the job that was frustrating him. And so what we found is he loves working for this temp company and doing temp work. He may or may not ever choose to work at a permanent full-time place of employment. We don't know. But he's happier than he's ever been because he can call them up and work whatever days that they have work. He works for them regularly. He works almost every week. Some weeks he might even work every day, but that's his choice, and he's often going to different workplaces and different sites. And that not only gives him the opportunity now, but it helps him build the skills and the interest and the confidence to be able to do that long term. He may decide at one of those temp placements, they may want to offer him a job. He may like it. He may stay as a permanent long-term employee. And this is just a different path for him to get there. So it kind of fits back into that buffet idea that I mentioned before. This is our happy surprise. This is the one we're so excited about. We approached Jersey Mike Subs, not so much a cold call, but definitely a cool call. And we approached them about the possibility of hiring an individual with disability. And that was an ongoing, evolving conversation, as many employment staff have, with the possibility of hiring someone with a disability. And so we were working on the idea of having them perhaps hire someone part-time. What could we provide value? What could we provide a staff to do? We have individuals with, all these different work experiences. So in talking about this, we explained to them this would be what's called a job carve. And so the job carve, as many of you know, is it may not be an existing position, but it's existing duties. And by freeing up someone to do just those specific duties, it allows your other staff to focus on things that they specialize in. So perhaps at Jersey Mike's, for the people that are making the subs and the sandwiches, they can focus more on that and on the quality control of the food and the materials that they have to make those. and perhaps someone else could be doing some other responsibilities. So the individual they hired that we support is responsible for doing things like restocking napkins, straws, cutlery, taking out the trash, keeping the dining area clean throughout the shift, so constantly cleaning the tables, sweeping up, things like that, right in the little eating area. And he's done a very good job, and he works on a regular basis directly for Jersey Mike's, of course. The unexpected side effect that the employer did not anticipate, nor did we, was that customers began commenting regularly on how wonderful this person made the experience of eating in, and how more people started staying to dine in, which often means they will order additional menu items. And the profits for the store, according to Jersey Mike's, increased noticeably, directly correlated to when this individual started working there. I will tell you that I've been in this particular establishment before and after, and I will tell you there's a noticeable difference. The entire environment is just more positive. He's a very social gentleman, and that often was a barrier for him in certain jobs and certain environments. But in this environment, he's constantly socializing and talking. He's a very pleasant guy. He's wonderful to interact with. And so his skills and his personality fit so nicely into what they needed. Based on this success, and this blew us away, the franchise owner is going to be opening anywhere from 5 to 10 more restaurants in the next few years, and they are going to budget this new job carve position into every future restaurant they open out of all of those, because they see the multiple benefits to them that it provides. And it's a commitment that they made totally unknown to us. They shared it with us and caught us completely off guard and ecstatic, because that means 5 to 10 more people having the possibility of a job like that is legitimate, that is interacting with the community, that allows them to build the natural community supports, all the things that we're working towards. This was our most recent idea. We were talking about the ongoing and increasing the pool of employers that are open and considering hiring individuals. So what we came up with was, we're a member of the Salisbury Chamber of Commerce, and we've certainly been to their business after hours, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with those types of events. They're very informal and social based. And so what we came up with was, since the Salisbury Chamber of Commerce regularly hosts business after hours events, why don't we host one? They're usually on Thursday evenings, because it's towards the end of the week. It allows the employers to be able to relax, maybe have a couple of drinks, socialize, network, those types of things. And as I said, we tried to leverage the ability that we have this banquet area. So we hosted the event last Thursday, November 9th, and we provided the beverages, alcoholic and other. We provide some heavy hors d'oeuvres, and we had the venue. It was a very informal event, as they always are, but we had it structured in a very intentional way. And the same individuals that participated in the reverse job fair a few weeks through doors were provided table space in one part of the banquet area. And this part of the banquet area was near the drink table, so they were going to interact. And they had their table set up, and it went incredible. We had some state legislators there. We had families. We had agency staff. Many local employers that came to the event, and the individuals we support, some who worked the event, and some who were at their tables at the reverse job fair. One employer in particular came to us at the end and said, "This is the best one I have ever attended, and I've been going to these for years. When are you guys having the next one?" And the individuals surprised even us. And we know these people. We work with them every day. We care about them deeply. They surprised even us. They were so positive, proactive. They engaged people and brought them over. Several of the legislators commented to us. They said, "This is amazing." And it's not anything amazing that we did. It's that we provided the opportunity to connect the amazing people that we support with these people in the community who have more limited contact with them. And we're able to kind of show and explain to people that see this untapped resource that's out there. Help us be able to connect things. It's something that we desperately want to be able to be a part of. So I'm going to leave you with some lessons here that we have learned through this. The first is, you have to brag among yourselves within your organization and with your stakeholders about every single success. Success breeds more success. As I said earlier, it all builds towards something. Even though something with a particular individual or a particular initiative may not work out the way you think, that doesn't mean it's not going to work out. The employer breakfast that I talked about earlier, the very first one, we had one employer show up. Only one. We were so disappointed. We had worked so hard on preparing for it. However, that one employer hired one individual that's still working there now over a year later. And it was actually a tire and auto center. Then out of that first breakfast, we were able to build the John A. Janosic partnership. And then at the second, John A. Janosic participated in our panel. Then at the third, Jersey Mike's, who had happened between the second and third breakfast, we were able to have them present on all the successes that I just shared. So you really have to keep that going, keep that momentum. Think outside the box and throw it at the wall and see what sticks. I'm a big believer in this. You do not know what's going to work until you try it. And sometimes the idea is silly, and sometimes it bears out afterwards that it's silly or it didn't work, and that's fine. But don't shoot down any idea just because you haven't done it or you haven't heard that it works, because the idea of constantly generating new ideas, all of these things that I've shared with you all came from ideas that we had that were small little ideas that we kind of groomed and we kind of built up, and we had different people within the organization kind of poke at it to see, is this a valuable idea? This next one, I know we all know this, but it bears repeating again. There's no one size fits all. We have had a habit in our field, in my opinion, of trying to fit individuals into existing job situations. And what we have to do a better job as, and what we're trying to work on, is having the job fit the individual, not the other way around. It takes a lot more thought and it takes a lot more work for us on the front end, but we're happier. And the individuals and their families are much happier. We've actually had some families that have been rather hesitant come around because we've been able to show that. This, to me, is one of the keys to my presentation. I really and truly believe, from experience I've seen working here, a large part of our job is not so much convincing the community employer to give someone a chance. It's convincing the individuals we support to give themselves a chance. There are so many people that we support here who thrive once they give themselves that chance. They have the skills, they have the ability, and everything is there except their self-confidence. And I do believe that's a huge part of what we do, and I know it's a huge part of what employment staff work on all the time. As I said to you at the beginning, I'm grounded, I'm realistic. You will get frustrated. Some ideas that you try will not work at all, but don't quit. Don't give up just because some of your ideas don't work. If you keep throwing stuff at the wall, you will find something that sticks. Then you do that, you build on that, and you go from there. Some people or their families will take a lot of convincing. It will take longer with some families or individuals to see progress. Some may never get there for whatever reason. Some may choose to never want that. That's okay. But I will tell you that we have had families and individuals who we didn't think were going to be successful in a community setting necessarily, who have turned out to thrive. And this last one is really important to look at, is leverage your own assets. For us, we could look at our banquet area and the fact that we have an in-house kitchen and all of those things. We could look at that as a negative. However, we try to look at it as an asset. The kitchen that we had in-house provides an opportunity to train people who now have skills to be able to work community. We actually have people working now in community kitchens who were working there. So you have to leverage whatever your assets. We use our banquet area as an asset to bring people in so that we can then pair them up and take them out. Sometimes that's what you have to do. It doesn't mean that we're not further developing the ability to train people and hire them in the community, but it means that sometimes you got to take a baby step before you can take a bigger step. And as long as you're constantly walking in the right direction, that's really all that matters. So identify what your agency's assets are. And they may be your people, it may be your board, it may be your families, volunteers, something about your location, whatever it is, figure out what that is and use that to be a bridge to the next thing. The last thing I want to leave you with, that it's a lesson we've learned, is that new and different has to be communicated. And it has to be communicated how it benefits the people that you're trying to convince. And if you treat everyone with respect and encouragement and give people time to make these changes, then you'll be surprised, and let yourself be surprised. And you have to communicate internally. If you get one person a job, make sure you make a big deal about that, not only to the individual, but to the entire team and as many people in the organization as possible. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of things here to look at that are some quotes I wanted to share with you because I believe they really speak to perseverance. The first, these are all Thomas Edison, and these are all things that I believe not only speak to the individuals we support, but also to us as staff. We both need to internalize these. When you've exhausted all the possibilities, you haven't. The second one, as you can see, is the famous one he said about inventing the light bulb. He's found 10,000 ways that didn't work, but that doesn't mean that he didn't eventually do it. Many of life's failures, and I've seen this as a case manager as well as in the role I'm in now, are just that people give up when they're right on the verge of success. And we all do that. I do it in my personal life. We all do it. And then finally, everybody knows this, but genius is 1% inspiration and it's 99% perspiration. It's the hard work that gets us where we have to go. So I thank you everybody very much for the opportunity, and I'll be happy to answer questions at the end.
Tim, thank you so much. I really enjoyed listening to that, and I appreciate the fact that you gave such an incredibly honest presentation about, the experience that Dove Point is having in the transformation process, and really you eloquently stated that it's a lot of hard work, but I can hear the passion that you have for supporting your organization on this. I actually wrote down your quote about you can't turn the RV around on a dime. I think that's a great quote. So again, I know a few of you have typed questions into the question box, and we're going to hold those questions to the end, so please don't think that we've forgotten about them, but I want to give a chance to all of our panelists to answer them. So we're going to shift gears now, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce two gentlemen from the organization Seek, based out of Silver Spring. Joining us today is Steve Blanks. Steve has been with Seek since 1999 when he started as the Director of Employment Services. Since 2010, Steve has served as the Director of Workforce Development, and in his current role, he directs a staff of over 50 employment and support professionals who facilitate community-based employment and inclusion for about 130 men and women. Steve is also the primary administrator of Seek's participation in Project Search and is an active member of APSE. And it's also safe to say that Steve is also passionate about his work. Joining Steve is Rick Andrews. Rick is the program manager for the Workforce Development Department at Seek. Rick started his career at Seek working as an employment consultant, finding employment opportunities for people served. Through that work, Rick found out that he has a passion for professional development and mentoring of employment specialists. Rick now oversees day-to-day supports and services with the Workforce Development Department at Seek. Steve and Rick are going to share Seek's particular take on employer engagement, and I think you'll find that Seek is in a very different place as far as service delivery from Dove Point. They do not provide facility-based services, so I wanted to be sure that we were giving two perspectives from two different organizations. So thank you both to Steve and Rick for joining us, and I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay, thank you, Stacy, and thank you, Tim. You are clearly very passionate about what you do, and the lyricism that came out of it, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to replicate that. Rick is much more wise than I am. So we're going to move to the next slide, Rick, and you're going to hear Rick and I intersperse together. And I think one of the things that is maybe a little different from what you heard from Tim's perspective is we're going to talk a lot about it takes a village. So Rick and I have been bandying our heads together for the last few years while he's been with us. And before that, myself and our executive director, Karen Lee, have bashed our heads as we've gone through some form of conversion. We've been around for close to 30 years as an organization. And on this slide, you'll see kind of our basic kind of program structure. We're going to focus mostly on the workforce development area and talk a little bit about the connection with Project Search. But just to give you a little background, we support actually close to 200 people around workforce development, support employment, and Project Search. We have about 40 individuals in our purely supported living program. And again, fully community-based. We don't own any of the homes and provide a range of drop-in supports through till kind of full 24-hour supports. We have a community learning services program that's called Community Employment Network, and we're going to talk a little bit about through this presentation of how our support employment workforce development marries with that group, because I think for us one of the biggest challenges is moving from a very traditional support employment to really truly customized employment that takes in some of the new ideas around self-employment. I'm really excited, Stacey, that there's going to be some technical assistance for the state around that, because I think that's really the next boundary for us here at SEEK as well as Maryland. So working with a Meaningful Day program is our community employment network and the community learning services program. And then we have a range of individuals, probably about 40 or 50 people we support in personal support services, either still living at home, and again, we're providing kind of minimal drop-in, independent living kind of supports through till 24/7 supports in their homes that they own themselves. And parent-to-parent is also a component of who we are and what we do. Switching back to workforce development, we've gone through a number of iterations as an organization from where we started. When we started as an organization, we started as a supported employment provider to 6 people. And it was fully community-based. It was based on the idea that individuals who wanted an opportunity for employment when they came out of the school system really only had the idea of sheltered employment. And so this agency started by a set of families with the idea of community first. And so fortunately, we're not as burdened down with fully conversion and closing things down. So we may be a step ahead of other folks, but we still go through the same trials and tribulations that Tim mentioned, and it is a journey. I think I wrote that down when Tim was talking. This is a journey that is an iterative process, and you've got to try some things, you've got to take some steps, and you then got to take some steps back and reflect. So although we may be a little further along in that conversion process, we've gone through many transformations, and we're all here together to help each other out, and I think that's why these webinars are so useful. Just a little bit of history. So when I first joined the organization in '99, we actually had a combination of a supported employment program that was married together with a medical day facility. So we did actually have a facility that was kind of a part-time hub for people, and we created these meaningful days using the medical day model as well as supported employment. The problem, as everybody knows, is when you build it, they will come. And we went from 30 individuals kind of doing that combo program to almost 100 people. And our building started to not look very good, didn't start to smell very good, and didn't really reflect what we wanted to do, which was community first. So we realized that we needed to switch gears up. So in 2005, we worked with some consultants who came in and really helped us around customized employment and thinking differently. And we realized we needed to kind of wholesale change what we were doing. And one thing that I actually heard at a conference last couple of weeks ago was a really neat way of kind of looking at the change. And so there's 3 kind of things that you do. You first start by thinking big. Tim talked about a strategic plan. We developed a strategic plan. We had a very clear idea of what we thought it looked like in the end, but we started small. And we started with a pilot. So in December 2005, we started with a community-based team of 12 individuals that was supported by 8 or 9 staff that really was fully community-based, was looking at both customized employment as well as Meaningful Day, fully immersed in the community. Based on that success of that first pilot, we situated a second pilot a year later, and we were able to close that medical day 3.5 years later, and that was in 2009. And so again, we're a little different phase of life from some of the providers out there, but we still struggle with the same issues. And employer engagement is definitely something that, even though we'd closed the doors to our facility in 2009, we bounced around. We didn't really figure out what was the crux of what that employer engagement was. So I'm really excited about today, where we can share a little bit more about how we became a little bit more sophisticated, how we became a little bit more conscious of the value proposition like Tim talked about, but also about the relationship. And instead of having very transactional relationships with employers where we've got a great job seeker who can do the job, we put them in there, they do well, we fade away, and then we kind of forget about the relationship. We've really become, I think, a lot more sophisticated. And the reason we became more sophisticated was because our outcomes weren't where they were supposed to be. I'm going to turn it over to Rick right now, who's going to talk a little bit more about the why this employer engagement is really important, and a little bit, he's the academic in the house, so he's going to share some data with us.
Oh, no, don't put me up too much on high up a pedestal. I can't follow up too strong on that, but thank you. And I think to follow up on what Steve mentioned about the why, is we wanted to ensure that we were truly finding what Tim mentioned as well, these person-centered employment-related outcomes for each person. We realized that some of the opportunities, many weren't customized to the strengths and abilities to the people that we were supporting, and in turn, people weren't staying in their jobs. What we find with people with or without disabilities is that if you don't like a job, you're not going to stay in it. You're not going to get up in the morning. You're not going to go to the job. You're going to find more problems with the job than some of the positives. So we really had to figure out how to ensure that we were giving each person a fair chance at this employment outcome to be satisfied, to be passionate, to enjoy where they were going and developing skills and building their competence, which in turn develops in a sense of confidence. We've seen where people have been afforded opportunities and have identified opportunities that have changed the way that people around them think of that person. And so employment offers a range of abilities and opportunities for a person to develop skill sets that may not have been looked towards that person to do so in the near future. And so on that tone, on that piece, I wanted to kind of open up for dialogue, maybe in the chat box, to see how do you find a job? You know, one of the questions is always, you know, there are different approaches, but looking at the 4 approaches that we have currently, networking, internet ads, recruiters, and that of others, what do you all think? So just take a couple of seconds and type it in your chat boxes. We have a few responses coming in, and so what we find out, and the research is very clear on this, is that the majority of how people find jobs with or without disabilities is through networking. Roughly more, I would say equal, more than 75% of the time is through networking, and the remainder proportion of that pie is relates to that way that many traditional approaches have taken, internet ads, recruiters, and other whatever that may be in regards to finding an opportunity through traditional means, what have you. But we found is that it's all about who you know and who you connect with, and so really harnessing the energy of networking and developing a circles of support to figure out how do we develop these opportunities for the people we support is extremely important. And so I'm going to share this next slide.
Rick, can I just read out to you some of the answers that people put in our box here? And it seems like the overwhelming theme matches up with your chart. We see community exploration in the neighborhoods they live, networking, another networking, in-person meetings with employers, partnerships in the community, internships, job searches, networking and intimacy with businesses, especially in rural areas. So lots of networking.
Great, thank you. So I see we're on a similar theme. So we are speaking to the choir somewhat. And what I wanted to highlight, just to reiterate that piece, is what Lou Adler, the renowned author for performance-based hiring, has really found in his research is that there are generally 4 categories of job seekers. And so what you'll see is the categories below: underemployed and active, employed and actively looking, employed and somewhat tiptoeing around it, and then also employed and maybe once in a while looking for a job. What you'll find, which is very clear, and I know it's a lot of information, but what you'll see is in the red, which highlights the ability to network prevails each and every category. That shows that regardless of how you are intrinsically motivated or how energetic you are or how what your purpose may be in finding a job, networking, as you all mentioned, is that key factor in finding that next opportunity for yourself. So again, thinking of social capital in regards to who do you know? and even thinking about who they may know, bringing them into the conversation. And what I truly love about Seek is we're trying to figure out how to hone that as best as possible to developing the people we support, and developing their own circles of support. Unfortunately, some people may not have direct family that are supporting them on a daily basis, weekly basis, or monthly basis. They may not be knowledgeable of who they can call out to if they're in trouble, aside from a paid staff. And so part of that conversation of developing employment opportunities is also developing one's social capital and also network, broadening out just the conversation of employment being looking on the application, hiring, science, and big businesses, but figuring out how do we utilize the relationships that we have? How do we start from a place of, well, let's first start to talk about what work means to you. Let's have conduct information interviews or meet with people to really get an insight and understanding as to what that really means. And you find those opportunities through the people you know, whether if it's the next door neighbor, whether if it's mom's a colleague from high school, or whomever that may be. But utilizing that untapped resource at times is truly pivotal to helping people connect to their ideal jobs as well.
So Steve here again. So a little bit about our why. Although we had been focused on employment, our employment rate really wasn't ticking much above 45% across the organization, and that usually goes back to, again, those people who are most easy to find jobs for, and finding those easier jobs that are out there. So we knew to get beyond this kind of barrier, it was almost like an invisible glass ceiling that we had, that we needed to kind of look at things differently and act things differently. Majority of the employment was focused on, again, like I said, the people with the less severe, less complex needs. A lot of the jobs are in those very traditional ones. We have this road here in Montgomery County. We're in the Washington suburbs, and in Montgomery County, there's this big road called Rockville Pike. And for those of you who know it, it's an ugly road of traffic, but it has all of those big box names. It has the Best Buy, the Home Goods, the different kind of typical retail places, and that was often where we were typically going, the things that we would easily see, the one that has the job wanted in the window. We were kind of doing those very traditional things. And again, to Tim's point, if you're not doing anything, start doing that at least, right? Because jobs can come out of that, and those jobs can be meaningful and can be a first launching point for someone. So don't not do that if you're not doing anything. You've definitely got to start by doing something. But we had done that, we had tried that, we'd probably reached the saturation point or capacity point of that area for meeting the needs of the people we supported. So we really needed to kind of go beyond that. And I like this, is that we didn't have a unified message or a unified way of connecting and engaging employers. And that was more on our approach, right? That was more on how we spoke, what were we speaking about, what was the value proposition, and also a little bit of the process. People were going out with that end job goal in mind. I'm going out here, I'm about to go get a job, not about developing a relationship. So again, if you're taking away bits and pieces of this overwhelming webinar today, think about relationships first, jobs will come. Tim really laid that out really nicely. Yes, they developed a relationship and an outcome will come. It takes a little patience, and it can be frustrating because not all of those relationships are going to pay out. However, many of them will. So this was a little bit more of the reason kind of why that we started. I'll tell you the other thing that's not on this slide is because we'd also invested heavily in the project search work training model that we had at some business sites, we as an organization also learned that we weren't business focused in our approach and our messaging, like I said, but also in how we thought. So I happen to have a business background before I joined the agency, so I had some of that, but I think I'd gotten away from it. I'd gotten more to the social work model, to taking care and making sure that these guys are safe and healthy and happy and all of that, rather than thinking about the other part of the demand and supply equation, which is the employer. So sometimes you have to kind of do something different, and Project Search was something different for us, working very closely with businesses where I had to start dressing more business oriented, right? I had to start speaking and thinking more business wise, and that trickle down from kind of the top of reorienting yourself and rejiggering your culture to be more business minded takes a while, and Tim spoke to that, and Rick will speak to that as well. But you have to start with thinking differently at the top and trickling that down. And that's not to say that you completely do away with the social work caring model. That has to be a part of who we are, because again, we don't want to force people into jobs they don't want to do. We don't want to force people into jobs that they can't do or are going to be unsuccessful as well. But we've got to balance, and we can't just be one thing or the other. We have to be this blended model of business-minded people working with a customized focus for success for both the individual and the employer. Next slide. We've used a number of different approaches. Tim has talked about this. Chamber events, of course, is a very big thing for us. We're very fortunate. We're in the suburbs of DC. We in the Montgomery County area have 6 chambers alone. Some are big and bolder than others, and you know, they can be a little, for us, intimidating. You go to the Bethesda Chamber of Commerce, and you've got Marriott, you've got the senior vice president of Marriott up there, and that can be very intimidating for a junior member of the team trying to make those connections. So you kind of also have got to start small, and I think for us, the chambers have been very good at working with small businesses and getting to know small businesses who, like us, are starting to do their sales and marketing and getting to know the community. So chambers are very important. Rotary clubs and Kiwanis groups and those kind of things. For us, I would say that we've not been as successful with those groups, but I know and learned from other agencies in other parts of the state, other parts of the country, that have used those community groups to their success, because they're relationship entities, right? They're about helping each other, whether it's community oriented or charitable organizations, they're about helping each other. So whatever community organizations that you have in your community, you need to look at those. Your chamber may be a great way to start because it's business oriented, but there's probably other community organizations that will work differently in your areas. Neighborhood listservs. So you know, we think about kind of our personal networks, right? A lot of people, when they first start job developing and out there in the community, they're like, who do I know? And we get a lot of people coming straight out of college who join our organization. Well, they don't know so many people. So they may start with maybe their mom and dad, or their aunt and uncle, or their neighbor, or maybe the previous employer. And all of those are people that you have relationships with. They may not be people who employ, they may not be supervisors or decision makers, but they know someone. Everybody knows about the LinkedIn, the online social business group that's connecting. It's a fantastic way, again, for figuring out those relationships. And I found out actually yesterday, I was looking for somebody in a particular organization, just to try and background on somebody, and I literally typed their name into LinkedIn through my app, and I found out that they were connected to me three steps removed. So I know I could go and get more information from that person through my initial first tier of connections to get to the second tier of connections to get to the third tier connections, and I know that's something that we in this field don't use some of those online tools as excessively. But again, I think we need to figure out how to use those better and also use it two-way. So not only taking information from it, but also giving information, whether it's sharing or educating about employment of people with disabilities or knowledge about different tax credits that there may be. We need to sort of figure out how we not only take from it, but we give back to those organizations. So flipping gears a little bit, we're going to talk very specifically right now about something that we've just launched 1 year ago. I think our anniversary is coming up in a couple of weeks, and that's the Business Advisory Council. And I'm going to flip it over to Rick, who's going to introduce the idea and talk a little bit about where we started and where we are today. Because there's, like everything, there's a migration, there's a journey, and like Tim said, he had one person at the first breakfast, and the second one you had more, and the third one you have more, and that's the perseverance and patience that Tim really resonated with us, because we'd taken some starts that didn't work out as well, and I think we've now got a groove on which we're pretty excited about.
Thanks, Steve. And so, as he mentioned, in our engagement towards employers, we realized we had a pool of employers that were willing and able to expand upon opportunities and wanted to give back in multiple ways. And we always try to figure out, how to engage them in different routes so that they can provide us with different opportunities and information. And again, going back to this business-minded practice, how can they professionalize us as well? And so, what we realized was we probably should ask, how would you like to be involved? And part of that conversation came from, general involvement with employers and realizing that there was a lack of connectivity within that employer pool, but then also with us in regards to that give and take as well. Because the model itself, to what Steve was mentioning earlier, is that we have such an outcome driven model to where we're trying to obtain employment for each person. Sometimes we can lose sight of that. And so we had a conversation with a few of our members and said, first and foremost, like, Tim, who's interested? Who does this resonate with people? Does this business advisory council really stick? Does that idea make sense to help give feedback as well, but then also provide a network and opportunity and a chance to meet some of the employers that we're partnered up with to make us better as the practice? And one of the things that I've noticed within this business advisory council is that people are able to reach out to one another. People are able to ask honest questions. People are able to feel a sense of connectivity with their peers there. A lot of times when we're partnering with organizations, providers, what have you, that start off, it's a unique model. You have someone that may be advocating on behalf of another person, and the business owner may say, hey, I've never done this before. This is new. And they're just at times winging it. Some people have heard of the different organizations. Some people may have an idea what that means. But when you come here, it's this commonality to where, hey, how is it working for you? How did you work past this struggle? What are you doing in regards to this avenue as opposed to this? And it's a free form way of sharing, networking, and also obtaining advice just for everyone in part. And so, again, this group meets regularly to bring in the wisdom and experience for us to professionalize ourselves and to figure out the different routes in which we can engage employers in a different way, from that of hosting mock interviews to that of hiring events to that of job fairs and things of that nature. And we've really been able to engage them. And I think what resonated with me when Tim was speaking was we first started with the question of who's interested. And I think, Tim, we may be tied. We had about one person that said, yeah, let's give this a shot. And so we went back to the drum board and said, okay, we got one person down. Let's keep trying to build it. And so to your point that you brought up, Tim, as well, is, it may not go as planned, but keep trying. Try outside of the box. Think about some of the partners that we're connected with, and even think about some of the partners that we're starting that discussion with. What we've noticed is we've had a need and also an ability to bring in new partners as well that are saying, okay, well, I'm not sure what this actually means to hire a person with disability. I'm not necessarily sure if I'm interested in partnering, but let me learn a bit more. And you're able to have that natural feedback from real employers. And so currently we have we meet on a bi-monthly basis. We try to respect the hour time limit within the 8 o'clock to 9 time frame. Again, going back to what Tim mentioned about his model, we want to respect their time because, again, going to that business approach, time is money, and we work with a lot of business owners that are very mindful of that, and we want to ensure that they are able to give back to us, but not hinder their own personal performance, whatever that may be. And so what we're learning and really enabling members to do is host events. And so what you'll see on the right side is actually one of our members from Montgomery College hosting a mock interview session we had yesterday, to where we have members from again, a recruiter partnership that we've had with the team member, and also with Montgomery College as well, and many members that have said, this is something that's extremely important for some of the youth and people in general that are engaged in employment to learn about, how do you come to an interview professionally? How do you give eye contact and shake hands? And what you'll see on the picture is a yellow spreadsheet, and so we have feedback forms, and so it's a great dialogue to where you have professionals who have been in the field who are invested and want to give back and help that our goal towards employment outcomes naturally. And so they may say, hey, you did a great job in elaborating your past experience at your last job site. Here's a recommendation to elaborate more on the specific duties as opposed to maybe some personal items that you may have disclosed. And it's a great learning experience, not just for us as the provider agency, but also for the job seeker in engaging the next person. And so our general topic breakdown is sharing and bragging. And one of the things that we realized is we need to ensure that people are recognized, and recognition comes a long way when it comes to going back to this relationship piece of not just this transaction. Okay, you hired a person, that's it. No, how do we highlight you in front of your peers? How do we ensure that we're giving back this level of acknowledgement and thanking you? And so we've shared different opportunities such as mock interview sessions, people being hired, people signing up for informational sessions, training our employment consultants on better preparing resumes, for instance. Meeting a job seeker is one of the more interactive phases that we've done, and similar to this more engagement piece, actually having people prepare, whether if it's their resume or a visual resume to employers to really help the employer understand a person's skill sets in a different way. And so traditional resumes may have, black and white template, and, it says a bunch of words that sometimes it resonates and sometimes the person knows what it actually means. No, this is a actual interactive dialogue that's had between the employer and the job seeker themselves, to where they're elaborating on their past experiences, what they're aspiring to be, and also opening up for dialogue as to, who do you may know? What may be another path that I can take, or where can I gain additional information on this specific path that I'm on? Reviewing of job seeker statuses. So again, going into the topic of meeting people, having each person check in, thinking of sharing networks as well. A person may have met a job seeker the prior month, and in the following meeting, they say, hey, you know what? I met someone within, this car industry I think would be good for the last person we saw. I would love to partner up and figure out how to make an introduction. And then even different ways to how the BAC can work. And so refining our practice, because we love feedback. We want to make sure we refine as best possible so that it's a mutual, relationship between us, to where if they feel as though they're not engaging enough, or if there's topics that they would like to discuss, we have flexible ways into adjusting whether if it's our agenda or if it's the way we're going in regards to engaging our job seekers. They're able to provide us with different feedback as well.
It's Steve jumping back in again. This is what I do with Rick. He kind of gets annoyed at me, but we jump back and forth, back to this idea of brainstorming. It's always tough to look back and kind of see all the steps and record them accurately. So Tim's idea of archiving it and having an archive person is very important. But just a little bit of history. So we were hit over the head in 2015 by a board member who says, why don't you recognize employers? And we're like, well, we kind of do, right? We kind of say thank you, and we might give them a card if they hire someone. But we didn't do it formally. We didn't do it in a big way, and we didn't brag about it like Tim had suggested. And we're like, duh, why don't we do that? So you don't need an excuse to recognize employers. You need to just do it and impart it into your culture of recognizing employers. And there's many ways to do that, again, with a physical thank you, a note, a card. Social media is very big for us right now. We use Facebook to recognize every new employer. We recognize this BAC group. We recognize, so Dawson's Market is one of our Business Advisory Council members who's very active and very involved. They just celebrated their 5th anniversary. We're like, of course we're going to brag about that. So again, giving back, this reciprocity is a very important piece. But back to how this group formed, because Rick stepped over it very, very quickly, but it was really important. We needed to recognize. So we said, October, great month, right? National Disability Employment Awareness Month. Let's figure out how to use that month to recognize, to celebrate, to brag the hell out of things, as like I like to say. And so we said, well, let's do a breakfast. A very common business practice. Like Tim, it doesn't have to be a brand new novel idea, do what's common also. That's what the Chamber's events were. We would go to breakfast all the time, but why don't we host it? Why don't we own it? We were very fortunate through our board connections. We have a local business here called United Therapeutics that has this very cool, unique space. So it stood out, right? It's nearby our offices, and we used that space to host it. So they got a chance to brag about who they were with these other local employers. We invited our network of people. We tasked the board members, and we've done this every year since. We've tasked each board member to bring a friend, an enemy, I don't care who it is, as long as they might hire someone, right? So bring someone you know to learn more about what we do. And I think the first year, 3 of the board members did it, right? You know, not that successful. The next year, 5 of them did it. And this last year, I think we had 10 or 12 of them inviting people. We invited the network of people that we knew. We had families inviting networks of people. And our first event, I think we had probably 50 people show up. So pretty good success. We were pretty proud of ourselves. I think we patted ourselves on the back and gave ourselves a shining star. We recognized we had specific awards that we gave to employers. We had a keynote speaker. We had someone very important to us from NIH gave a keynote speech around stigma, which I think people thought was valuable. And we had Carol Beatty, thanks to Maryland Department of Disabilities, come and give the proclamation. So you know that as a provider, you can get that proclamation from the state of Maryland for National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And so we did that formally there, pictures, all the 9 yards. And as Rick said, we asked people, okay, we kind of want to see if anyone wants to be part of this BAC. And we did this terrible ask. It was kind of really lame. And I think one person maybe said, tell me more, right? And we didn't follow up with it. We didn't kind of push it. And then there was a bigger push with a partnership from a local school and through our project search partners. And we said, hey, let's make a bigger push coming into the next October's National Disability Employment Awareness. We put it out there, and the hands went up. And that's when this first group started last December with, I think, 20 people showing up. And of course, like every group, the group willows down to a few, and then you kind of keep augmenting and recruiting people. So like Tim said, it's a journey. We're not all the way there. We don't have this humming group of 50 business leaders throwing jobs at us left, right, and center, but we've got probably a core group of 8 to 10 people who are committed, who show up, do these mock interviews, give their time, give us their advice, and help us move on. I'm going to switch it back to Rick.
Thanks, Steve. And so if a few things that have come out of this have been a diverse way of engaging our job seekers in a different way. And so you'll see Ashton, and that was our first mock interview. We actually hosted it at the Sandy Spring Bank in Rockville. Brett was able to obtain employment at Soldier Fit in this customized role to where we tied his skills to the employer's needs. We had a CVS hosted a hiring event to where they educated the youth and job seekers alike of what it meant to begin a role and career at CVS and what the path meant to where you, from where you started to where you're, where you're going. And then we also had a job trials as well, and Montgomery Parks and Planning were awesome because they were able to afford this opportunity to where we said, we think we know this guy's skill sets and interests, but we're just not sure. And they said, hey, we got a couple of projects that you can definitely work on and see if this is something that resonating with this guy. And he loved it. And you'll see a different, diverse abilities from each person, but we were able to find the right match for that person because of that BAC route. And so just some last tangibles to leave you on is we had to change our approach to employees. That's very important. And so we really, if anything, you remember, like Steve mentioned, realize that relationships are truly important to leading towards that employment outcome. And so we've learned from one of our community partners this concept of 3 I's. And so that was the good starting point for us to where we said, okay, once you're first engaging someone, whether if it's at a business event or just talking to someone out in the street, cold call, whatever it may be, think of the 3 I's: information, invitation, and introduction. And so information being that of, breaking down myths, facts, or whatever it may be, or even an approach that's been very helpful within our field for employment consultants: feel, felt, found. And so a lot of times there will be hesitations from employers, as I'm sure everyone knows, One being, well, I'm just too concerned that I'll invest too much time. And so one of the tangible tools that some of our consultants use is that of the feel, felt, found approach, in that you would essentially identify and empathize with the employer and saying, hey, I definitely can feel or understand where you're coming from, and relate it to people that others have felt in a similar fashion, that the theme of, investing too much time when we don't have time at all to waste could be a big concern. But what we found is that our employers that we partner with have actually not invested the same amount of time, and in fact, being provided the opportunity to have, whether a job coach or this natural support, is that we come in as experts to prevent that from happening, or even helping other employees as well learn a different way, because that's what we're in the business of. Invitation, again, thinking of chamber events, our National Disability Employment Awareness Breakfast that Steve mentioned as well, really highlighting the importance of recognizing employers, BAC events, and introduction. And it may be connecting, as we mentioned in the BAC piece, connecting employers with employers. A lot of times employers may be concerned because of the hesitation or the lack of experience that the consultant has had in that specific industry. However, speaking from a partnership from another employer and how Seek or another organization that has worked within that field can be a great opportunity for not only networking, but this trust building and relationship developing. What we also really wanted to highlight on this, again, recognizing the employer. Steve talked about our Indeem piece. We wanted to make sure we give back. We recognize their great doings, and also had a chance to offer a free networking event. Again, meet with some of the business partners that we're in connection to and have a relationship with, and really highlighting this aspect of social media for their presence. So when there is something done, we can really blast it out to the masses and have it shared out, and really captivating this idea of recognition. So just a few tangible tools to really think through, how to change the culture of employer engagement, and also how to think differently. Because again, it's about relationships. It's about developing that circle of support and figuring out how to bring the team together, because it takes a village.
Steve and Rick, thank you so much for that presentation. I appreciate very much the honesty of, even though your organization, Seek, is really in a different place than maybe some of the experiences that Tim and Dove Point are in, but there's all the same themes. You talked about being able to try new things, relationship building, networking, just basically having what I would call stick-to-itiveness when things may not be working, but you're going to retool and get back at it. So you guys, thank you for being an example for a really strong employment first organization. I appreciate your knowledge and experience. We're going to shift gears to our last and final panelist. I'm thrilled to have with us today Neil Christopher, who is the Vice President of Manufacturing and COO for Acadia Windows and Doors. Acadia Windows has been in Eastern Baltimore County since 1947, and while Neil hasn't been in the business quite that long, he has been in the manufacturing industry since 1977. Part of Neil's story, though, is that he's also a strong advocate for employment for people with differing abilities. He has testified before the Alliance for Full Participation, the Social Security Advisory Board, and the National Governors Conference. Neil was recognized as the Max Volunteer of the Year in 2013 and currently serves as a Board of Directors member for the ARC Northern Chesapeake region and chairs their employment task force. I first had the opportunity to meet Neil when I was invited by the ARC Northern Chesapeake region to take a tour of Acadia Windows and Doors. I had seen a video that had been made about Acadia and their partnership with the ARC, and I had heard the stories before, but I was not prepared for exactly what I saw when I had a chance to go in person and actually meet with Neil. I found him to be extremely engaging and really took so much more time than I would have anticipated to talk about his organization and his experience as an employer hiring people with disabilities. So I asked Neil to join us today to talk about his experiences as an employer, and also things that he thinks are important and effective when approaching an employer about employment opportunities. Before I let Neil talk, however, I want to just take a minute and show a short video that Neil forwarded. And you're going to see Neil's cartoon likeness in this video. It gives us an overview about employment. I just heard that people cannot hear the audio for this video, so I apologize for that. I don't know why that's the case, but rather than spend time on that, I'm going to X out of that and go back to our presentation. And I will provide, this link is located inside the PowerPoint, so please, I would encourage, it's a really cool video if you have a chance to go and check it out. So I'm going to pass things over to Neil so he can give us his experience and share a little bit more about Acadia and their experience with supporting people with disabilities. Neil, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Good morning, and first of all, I'd like to thank all of you for what you do, Tim, Rick, and Steve, but the community as a whole, because you've changed our company in ways that we could have never imagined. The people who've done the work for us, the job coaches, the job developers, the people who drive the buses, all the people that work for the Arc of the Northern Chesapeake region have become part of our family and part of our team. And this was just an amazing process that we could not have anticipated, the change that went through our company. Some of you have heard this story, and some of you have been part of it. But I'm going to answer Tim's question. Tim asked, what do employers want? And we're going to try to let you know what we as an employer look for when we partner with a group like the Arc of the Northern Chesapeake. As Stacy said, we've been in Eastern Baltimore County since 1947. And in 2003, we figured we'd hired everybody in Eastern Baltimore County. So we placed an ad in the Aegis, which was a, remember placing ads in the newspaper? We placed an ad in the newspaper in the Aegis, which is in Hartford County, just 17 miles north. We were looking for a new labor pool. We didn't realize how new this labor pool would be. The ad was answered by Jan Stoffer, who at that time was a job developer for the Arc of the Northern Chesapeake. She now works for Doors. And she said that she had good workers, and we were very excited because every employer is looking for good workers. But then in the course of the conversation, she mentioned that the men and women that she had available were people with differing abilities, and we thought this is not going to work. As you may have seen in what the part of the video that was visual, we have saws, we have pieces of glass that are the size of the wall in your office. We have punch presses that are capable of amputation, and we thought this would not be a safe environment. But Jan was very smart. She asked for 15 minutes. Everybody has 15 minutes, and I personally, and I said this a lot of times, 15 minutes was just the right amount of time to brush her off. So we made the appointment, and Jan planned to come on the appointed day. But in the meantime, we had gone to our saw operators, and that's actually a saw in the picture you're looking at now. And we said to our saw operators, what do you guys need to do to be faster? And of course, around every window and door, there's that fuzzy stuff, the insulation. And the saw operator said, if you have somebody that can put that fuzzy stuff in, we can fly. And I thought about what Jan had said about repetitive work. And this was the epitome of repetitive work. Jan had said that the people she supported thrived on that. And we thought, well, maybe there's a possibility here. So what we did, we're a very transparent company. We brought all of our team members together into our lunchroom for our regular Friday morning meeting, and we said, we're thinking about hiring people with differing abilities. And they all said, this is not going to work. There's no way it's going to work. It's not going to be safe. It's dangerous. They won't be able to keep up. We all have our quotas. We all have our goals. So the first thing that I will share with those of you who are job coaches and job developers, that buy-in has to come from the top down, but it most importantly has to come from the bottom up. If it doesn't come from the men and women who are going to be working side by side with the supported individuals, it's not going to work. Tim said, no one likes change, and this is change in a way that scares people. And what they're afraid of the injuries. I agree with that. But in any organization, when a new person comes in, we look around and say, is this person going to pull their weight? Is it going to be more work for me or less work for me? And when people consider hiring people with different abilities, everybody assumes the worst. They assume that it's going to be more work for the people who are already here. And I have to say in the beginning, we don't do this because we're nice guys. We do this because it works. We do this because the men and women who are supported do pull their weight. And it was a learning curve, and what we had to do when we met with the ARC, and we met with the ARC 4 times before we actually even tried a personal line. Our men and women had lists of concerns, fears, and the ARC was very patient with us, and they addressed all those. And then we brought them back and said, well, we have more questions. And we did it again. We had even more questions. But by that time, we had been able to work with our team members, and we were able to see the ones that their minds were starting to open if they hadn't been open in the beginning. So when we brought a person in, this month, November 2003, we brought in Robin Bauman, and she put in that fuzzy stuff, the stuff that goes around the windows and doors. And Robin did a terrific job. But let me tell you a little bit about our corporate culture. We always believe that we can train you to build windows and doors, but we can't train you to be a good worker. We can't train you to be reliable. And that's where the partnership with the ARC was so powerful and so strong, because they had worked that way, and the job coaches had spent the time here, which was very valuable. They knew what we were looking for, and they were able to bring the men and women that would come to work not just prepared for the interview, but prepared for the job. They knew what to expect. We are also partnered with OSHA Consultation, Most Consultation in Maryland. We're a sharp site, and this happened about the same time. And at first, it was like, okay, on one hand, you want us to be a safer company, but on the other hand, you want to bring in people with differing abilities. How is that going to work? Well, what we learned was everything we did to make it safer for the men and women who were supported by the ARC made it safer for all of us. We steal safety slogans from other places, and we're proud of it. In our lunchroom, we have a sign that we stole from the Air Force that says, a safer you is a safer me. And that's one of the things we learned with the ARC, because we were making some changes, not a lot of changes, but we were making changes that were going to benefit everybody, all of our team members. We also have a track record for quality. Our products are tested and examined by many government agencies, NFRC, Energy Star, structural testing. All of our products have to be certified. And for all that to work, we all have to have a positive attitude. And one of the things we really learned with the people that came from the ARC was that they have a positive attitude every day. It's not hard for them to have a positive attitude because they're excited to be here. They're excited to be part of the team. They're excited to be part of the company. So one of the things the ARC likes us to talk about is metrics. So our first metric is attendance. Men and women supported by the ARC in the Northern Chesapeake region are within the top 5% of attendance company-wide. That's not just among themselves. That's every man and woman in every department. They're within 5%. They're also within 10%, in the top 10% of hitting their goals. Every week they consistently hit their production goals. And those goals have not been reduced because they're supported individuals. We call it job parsing, you guys call it job carving, but the part of the job they have, their quota is the same as person with any ability. Everybody has to hit the same rate, and they're able to do that, and they're able to do it easily. But the thing I can't quantify is their attitude. And you know, we have Charles McGee is a gentleman been with us for many years. He's been with us for almost the full 14 years. If I'm having a tough day, and you can have a tough day in manufacturing, I'll go out in the plant and I'll hang out with Charles, and he'll show me what he did, and he'll show me what he's going to do next, and he'll tell me I'm bald. I know that already, but he likes to kid around about, and he likes to be part of the company. And the last thing he says when I go back to my office is, I'm working. And indeed he is, and he's doing a terrific job. So we brought Robin in, and she did a terrific job as well. She looked around and she saw people putting the hardware on the windows and doors, and she said, I think I can do that job. And I had doubts because there's a lot of iteration of product. There's different tools, different manufacturing, much more complex than putting the fuzzy stuff in. But I said to Robin, you know, when things slow down a little bit, we'll give you a try. We brought the job coach back. Robin came in. She was there less than 3 days, and she had the job mastered. We were really happy that we'd been able to do that, but now we didn't have anybody put the fuzzy insulation in. So we had to call the ARC and say, hey, we need somebody else. And that's how it grew. It grew one person at a time. Now we have 6 people that are running all the different machines and doing operations in the production environment. They are 17% of our direct labor workforce. And things are going really well. Now we went from 1 to 2, and number 3 was Jessica Markle. And in spring of 2005, Jan called again and said, I have a young lady graduating from high school you might be interested in. I said, that's cool. And now we had a good relationship. So just making conversation, I said, what school was she graduating from? Jan said, the Maryland School for the Blind. And I said, Jan, remember, we make windows and doors. And she said, no. Jessica's worked in a facility making automobile headrests, and she did better than sighted individuals. Now, Jessica has an interesting story, and we have her permission and her family's permission to tell the story. Jessica is not only blind, she's developmentally disabled, and she has epilepsy. So there were a lot of concerns when we brought Jessica into the workplace. The job coaches came for the first week, and the job coaches came for the second week, and really at that point, Jessica was ready to let go, but we weren't ready to let go. It was our fears and our trepidation that was keeping the job coach here. So finally, the ARC had to trick me, really, and say, you know, we need a job coach on another site just for an hour, just for 2 hours, just for 3 hours. And they weaned the job coach away. Jessica was perfectly able to do the job. Now, Jessica is not real verbal. You can have a conversation with her, but sometimes it takes her a long time to say what she wants to say. So we gave Jessica a walkie-talkie. All of us have one. All the supervisors have one. We gave her a walkie-talkie with a special alert. And her special alert was just a buzzer that if we heard the alert, we would come and see what was wrong. So this is the first day in the factory without a job coach, and Jessica's buzzer goes off. People come from all over the factory. Are you sick? Are you hurt? Do you need to go to the ladies' room? How can we help you? Jessica was out of material. This was not a reasonable accommodation issue at all. This was a productivity issue. So when you think about what it costs to accommodate Jess, who's probably our most interesting case, it cost $11. The second thing we did was buy a bump cap for her, because in the area where she works, there are places where she can hit her head. And the third thing was probably one of the most interesting things. Jessica moves around by counting steps. She'll walk in a certain direction by counting steps, make a turn, count steps in a different direction. But our work environment changes, and it's not the same from day to day. So we tried all kinds of things. We gave her a button that she could push that would ring a bell, and she could walk towards the bell. But in the factory, in the wintertime, the doors are closed. In the summertime, they're open. In the spring and fall, they're going up and down all day, and it changes the acoustic environment. So that wasn't working. Finally, Charlie Hickman, one of the men that works with her, said, you know, why don't you go to Home Depot and buy some of that self-adhesive wool pile or self-adhesive sandpaper and stick it on the floor and let her follow that. And that worked terrifically. So that was another $6 that we spent to accommodate Jess in our environment. Employers hear the words reasonable environment, reasonable accommodation, and they always go to how much is this going to cost? Well, we tend to ignore the word reasonable. In her case, and again, the most interesting one, it cost us a minimal amount of money. But what we gained from that was Charlie's participation, because Charlie looked around and said, you know what, I could solve this problem. So big companies spend a lot of money on team building. They go to Outward Bound, they go zip lining, they go to Aruba. Our idea of team building is to come into the lunchroom and have a bunch of chess and checker sets and sit around the lunchroom and say, we want you guys to hang out with one another and interact in ways you don't normally interact. In working together to accommodate the men and women with the differing abilities, we were working as a team in a way we had never worked. And it made us stronger as a team, and it made it tighter as a team, and it gave us a sense of accomplishment. When we looked around and we saw we grew from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, and saw people come here and be able to make lives for themselves. And you know, Eric has his own apartment, and now Jordan's learning how to drive, and we have all these opportunities that we take for granted, but certainly it was the first for many of the men and women who came here. It made us a better company and a prouder company. The ARC's tagline is changing minds and changing lives. We add changing hearts to that too, because this is an industrial environment and it can be kind of gritty. We have a guy who works on our team. He's so crusty, we call him Krusty. And he looks around and says, how can I help? How can I be part of this team? How can I make these men and women successful? So I said earlier that this is our story, but it's your story too. Here's how you fit in. What do you do right? This is what the ARC did right. They took time to learn about our business. They came here before they had any idea who they were going to place, and they looked around and they identified jobs that they thought could work. We're in a lot of labor pools. Some of the labor pools we are in are compensated based on the number of individuals placed. That doesn't work. We need the long time commitment. We need to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, Jessica's a little bit off today. Can we get a job coach back for a couple of hours and see if there's some way that we can find out what's going on? And we did find, and we learned, and we changed our workplace a little bit based on that. The second thing that the coaches need to do is take the time to learn about the person you're placing. Know their needs, know their medical history, know what medications they're on, because all of that, you don't have to share it with us, but know what's going on. So if we have a question like we had with Jessica, we say, oh yeah, let me talk to her mom and dad, let's talk to the doc, and let's try to figure out what's going on. In Jessica's case, Jessica has epilepsy, but she had been seizure-free for many years. So when she had a seizure at the ARC and then here, we had to learn how to handle that and what to do differently. I think the most heartwarming part of that is when she had the seizures, she was away for a couple weeks for neurological evaluations, and the ARC, the people came to us and said, not the ARC people, the people that work side by side with Jessica, she's coming back, right? She keeps her job, right? She's still part of the team. That was important to them because she was important to them, and their sense of accomplishment that, you know, this is just another glitch. We'll find a way to make it work. And what we did was we reoriented Jessica's workstation. We turned it around so if she were to have a seizure and were to fall on the floor, she would land on the large area of the floor instead of the machinery that had been next to her had she had a seizure and fallen before. All of that was teamwork between our staff, between the supported individual, and between the men and women, the job coaches and the staff support from the ARC of the Northern Chesapeake. We worked together to enable Jessica to keep her job and still to be part of the team. Another thing that's important to us is, if it's possible, include the employer when you have your yearly conferences. One of the things we learned from Jordan Barnes that I mentioned earlier, Jordan wants to learn to drive. So we looked around that and we said, you know what, Jordan, you work on the loading dock and you're seeing photographs now of what our loading dock looks like. You want to work on the loading dock and you've done a good job. Jordan's been actually on the loading dock since 2005. Pretty much everybody on the loading dock drives a forklift. We'll teach you to drive a forklift if you can learn and get a driver's license. It's not a requirement, it's not required by law. But we thought that would be an incentive for him to get his driver's license, because now he can work full-time, now he can be independent, and now he can assume additional job duties and get increased money because he has a skill that he's learned and he can bring it to the table. Notify the employer when the employee is sick or otherwise unavailable. Transportation has to change. And make sure, and this is a big one, make sure that you're providing the mandatory training that the employer needs. OSHA has requirements. You need lockout, tag out, bloodborne pathogen, all the kind of things that you guys train in, we have to train in too. The big one is hazardous communication. What hazardous materials are we working with in the workplace? And we learned that in our regular training, we were not properly training the men and women who were supported. So we had to do individual training for them. Some of it was one-on-one, but that's where the job coach provides value and adds value. The job coach comes in, is part of the team, and the job coach learns about the job too. As we're training, we're all safer because of that. So our major concerns then and now, safety is our always concern. The second concern is damage to machinery. How are these people going to work with sophisticated machinery? Some of the machinery you've seen in the slides costs up to $250,000. Charles McGee, the guy that tells me I'm above, Charles McGee was operating one of those machines, and we had some material that was out of spec. So our director of maintenance was very discreet. He said, you might want to watch who you put on the machine. And what he was saying is, don't put Charles on the machine. But I listened to him, because if the machine crashes, there's probably up to about $6,000 worth of damage to the machine immediately. But the big deal is the loss of the machine. If the machine's down for a day to repair it, that's probably $50,000 in lost revenue. So we listened to the maintenance guy. We waited till more material came in. The maintenance guy signed off on it. The material guy signed off on it. We put it out on the factory floor. Charles picked it up, walked over to the machine and said, this isn't right. This isn't right. He couldn't tell us what was wrong with the material, but he knew it was wrong. And I guarantee you that anybody in this company, including me, including the maintenance director, would have loaded that machine and crashed the machine, because we don't pay attention. And this is something I think the support community could do a better job when you're talking about people on the autism spectrum. People on the autism spectrum have superpowers. I call it first day on the job focus. When we hire people, and I want to knock on wood when I say this, we hire people, they're nervous. They're working with glass, they're working with saws, they're working with punch presses. They're in an environment where they've never been, and they're uncomfortable. And guess what? They're paying attention. They're paying attention to how to do their job. They're paying attention to the material that they're handling. They're learning, and they're focused. Nobody ever gets hurt on their first day. That's why I knocked on wood. But when the people have been here 2 or 3 weeks and they get comfortable, then they relax. And that's when you get hurt. The same is true of quality, and the same is true of productivity. The men and women from the ARC never lose that first day focus. They're always in tune with what they're doing. They're always paying attention. They're not looking around to see who's doing what. They're not wondering about the football game that night. They're going to be great when they go in the lunchroom and we all talk about it. But for that minute, they're focused on the job. And Charles McGee proved that when he refused to put material just knowing that it didn't feel correctly, and he knew that it didn't feel like it normally did. That's something that I think is a selling tool for all of us when we look how we're going to support men and women with differing abilities. It's all about that ability to focus. We're in it for the long term. What do we need the government to do? We need the government to keep service agencies funded. We need to understand that we could not hire people if it wasn't for the job coaches, and we couldn't do it if it wasn't for the transportation and all the things that the ARC offers. But that's very narrow for us to say that, because that's what affects us. Also, the other services that are offered, the housing, the work with benefits counseling, and those kind of individuals make it possible for the men and women who are supported to be successful in and out of the environment, which makes them able to come to work and able to do their job. We really appreciate all that you do, and all the things you do to make it possible, because we are a different company than we were back in 2003. And we're different because of these individuals, Charles and Jess, and all the people that went before, Robin and Frank, and all these different people that are part of our team. So we thank you for making it possible. And I'm going to leave you with an offer. We can't hire everybody. We're a little company, but we see the value of it. And we also know that there's people that need jobs. Tell our story, use our website, use our videos, and there's a ton of videos. We'll give tours. Give us 45 minutes, and we'll change companies for the better. So that's what we're here for. We're here to help you because of the way that you've helped us for the last 17 years.
Neil, thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation. And I just would like to add, Neil talked a lot about safety being a really paramount part of Acadia Windows, and you know, that safety is priority. After I had the ability to go through the tour, and again, as Neil starts off by saying, you know, there's amputation dangers related to some of the machinery. It is a fairly gritty place. There's lots of chances to get injured just walking through. But on my way out, I noticed the sign in the break room that said how many days the company had gone without, I guess it's, Neil, is it people missing work due to injury? Is that the number that's in your,
missing work?
And how many days has it been, or how many was it? It was years.
Right now it's 3,140.
That's amazing.
As of yesterday.
So that's tangible. Go ahead, Neil.
No, that's a selling tool. When people, because the first thing people will bring up is it's safe, and I think that's why we're a good example. We're a more dangerous environment, I think, than most. We're not a grocery store. We're not a car wash or a place where people go to shop. So I think we're a little bit more dangerous, and because of that, it adds credibility to say that there are environments where people can succeed. I look at it this way: if they can succeed here, they can succeed in a Jiffy Lube or in a Walmart.
Absolutely, and that is one thing that I get asked fairly frequently by provider organizations when they say, you know, we've gone out and spoken to employers, and an employer's first response is often a perception that hiring a person with a disability is inherently a risk of some sort, or that there's a liability issue. And so seeing how a place that actually has real safety concerns deals with that is wonderful. So I appreciate the fact that you've opened that up to other people to contact you to take tours, and I'm sure that people will take you up on that. So I know we're right at noon, but I want to make sure that we have a chance to answer questions of all of our panelists. There was a question earlier on after Tim talked about his experiences at Dove Point, and it had to do with, let me see if I can get to the question. It had to do with how are you supporting people who maybe are not working all day. So for Steve and Rick and Tim, could you talk a little bit about ways that you support people when they're not working?
Yeah, I'll go real quick. What we're doing is we have that 3-track process, and I just briefly touched on it. The 3-track process is we're constantly building our community relationships for community volunteering. We have people that go to nursing homes. We have a reading program that goes to many of the local schools and daycares, including one of the community colleges. So, you know, if they aren't ready or they aren't interested yet in working, then we use that as our second choice, because that's often a training and proving ground. And then our third option is we want to get them into the community doing something that they want to do, interacting with the public. So we take those small groups, couple people, 1 or 2 staff, and involve in whatever community activities that we can.
And this is Steve here. Similar format. We, as I said at the beginning of our presentation, we have this community learning services program called Community Employment Network, and it's basically a wraparound model, and it is one staff with a small group of individuals, and we have kind of a framework that we like to have people have for a week. So we want people to have work as part of their week, and if that can be 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 30 hours a week, you know, whatever that may be, we try to kind of accommodate that as best as possible. And that's paid, customized, integrated employment. And some people have up to 20 or 30, and some people have 0. If somebody doesn't have a paid position, you know, volunteering and community partnerships are a very big part of what we do. And we probably have somewhere between the order of 40 and 50 different non-profit organizations where people are volunteering. Like Tim said, I think it's a stepping stone to employment. One of the traps, and we're struggling with this like everybody else, the traps that comes in if somebody loves where they're volunteering and they're doing some great skill work, they get trapped in it, and they might be doing that for years. So we've got to keep hitting ourselves over the head how to get out of that trap and sort of leverage what have they learned, what are the skills that they're taking away, that we then can put that in a real customized job where they get paid for those valuable skills. So that's a little trap that everyone just be mindful of. And then so that wraparound will have some, you know, work, whether it's paid or community volunteering, and then we have a social recreational component. We actually have hired part-time gym rats, for lack of a better term, who are there working on some fitness goals for people 2 or 3 times a week. We have classes that we participate through the community college that we're fortunate to have. We sometimes build our own classes with local partners, whether it be yoga, whether it be art, whether it be pottery. There's swimming. It's the whole wraparound that sort of affords people a typical kind of Monday through Friday 9 to 3. And then we accommodate in their schedule, whether it be work or volunteering, as it may be.
Thank you. I have another question, or actually 2 questions about the Business Advisory Council. First of all, how often does that council meet, and do you pay the members of the BAC, or is it voluntary?
Rick, are you answering this?
Oh, sorry. I thought someone else was going to ask. And so we meet on a bi-monthly basis. Members are not paid for it. They are involved because they have made a pledge to our mission and values towards employment outcomes for the people we support. The majority of people are our current partners. And so we've started, and again, this is a good point, we've started with some of our community partners that we knew who got the mission and really understood our investment, and I asked them for some of their time, whether if it was an attendance of you know, our bi-monthly meetings or some of the you know, events that we host. So like I mentioned earlier, the mock interviews, the reviewing of resumes, meeting the job seekers, having the consultant come out at the site to ask them a couple of questions. It's a variety of ways they can be engaged, but yes, it's free. Again, it's total investment from the employer, and understanding really how that impacts a job seeker. And again, it's a part of that networking and recognizing for them for their great works and what they do. So one of the things one of the reasons why we've awarded one of our employers is because of their commitment to employment, to the people we support, and have done that in front of their peers, shouted them out on social media, giving them free, almost free press in a sense. So it is a mutual relationship to where they feel so they're being invested in as well and not forgotten about.
This is Steve here. So we do pay them in coffee and donuts, right? So that's something that a lot of people kind of get excited about, especially Ken, who's one of our regulars. And again, we're thinking about reciprocity. So we've actually had Dawson's Market, that does a catering business, cater our breakfast and cater some of the smaller events. So we're also giving back to them that way. So I know it's not a one-for-one reciprocity, but we want to kind of make sure that we're giving them back something as well. And in fact, most of the participants have said, this you haven't asked us for much. You have not. This is not a burden. You've not asked us for much. So that's kind of hopefully an insight that we can ask for more.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions, so we've gone a little bit past our time. I want to really sincerely thank all of our panelists for taking time. I know that all of you have very busy schedules, but really I feel so privileged and humbled to have had all of you. You're all very passionate about the things that you do, and that comes across. So thank you. as a reminder, these materials, and actually one of our participants pointed out that I made a spelling error, and I apologize, and I'm going to fix it. I spelled Acadia wrong on our slides. So we're going to fix that and resend it out so that people have the correct contact information. As a reminder, our next webinar is scheduled for Friday, December 15th. So we'll be sending out an announcement so you can register for that. On behalf of myself and DDA, I want to wish everybody a very happy Thanksgiving next week. And I will see, or I guess I won't see you, but I will see you virtually via our next webinar. Thank you, everybody.